so nice to be back, and I'm so excited for our first guest, Barry Diller. So he describes his book in this wonderful new book that he published just a few months ago. He describes his life as a series of paradoxes. In this fascinating memoir, he writes about secrets and fears that haunted him well after he had become one of the most powerful people in Hollywood. At other times, he sounds like the epitome of a macho corporate warrior thriving on brinksmanship. He writes that he's never done anything for money, and yet he became one of the richest people in the world. He's had a long and loving relationship with his wife, Diane von Furstenberg, yet there have also been many intimate relationships with men. He's a billionaire who throughout his many careers has had an uncanny ability to connect with public tastes and wants in movies, television, and print media, as well as travel, dating, and shopping. He has kept a great many secrets in life, or at least he did until now. So please join me in welcoming Barry Diller to At Lunch, even though lunch is a little late today. Hi, Barry.
Hello, nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you too. I was just up by Little Island the other day, and I always think of you when I go by there. So you worked on this book for what, 15 years? And I guess I guess I'd like you to tell people what took you so long and what was the most important part of telling this story to you, the personal or the business? And what was the hardest part?
A three-part question. Thank you, Julie.
3 parts. You can handle it.
I hope so. Well, I mean, I could say I'm slow, but the truth is, so why it took me so long. The truth is that I can't pinpoint exactly how long ago, but it was probably more than 10 years ago. I started doing it, and I would put it aside for a couple of years. I've had other things to do. I've been in business and life all that time. So a year might go by where I didn't touch it at all, and then I'd come back to it and whatever. It was only the last couple of years that I really was at it like a good part of every day or part of every day. But anyway, it took me a while. The business and the personal, the thing that was interesting about the process for me was that when I started, I thought, God, I can't remember anything. How am I going to do this? I mean, there's a lot of data history that I have that was written about over all this time. But what I've realized when I started doing it is, first of all, I thought it's a good story, and I can tell it. I have to tell it true. And so when I began, what I was shocked at is that all these things that I thought I would never remember, just about my early years, etc., just came back kind of in a clear picture as I was trying to get it down. So it was kind of both the personal, and then it's been so intertwined with me, the personal and the business, that I kind of never really pulled them apart in the telling of the tale.
Yeah, but it is, I mean, I know you write about a therapist at a point in your life who was very helpful to you. But reading this book is, as I said in the introduction, it's fascinating to me as a character study. Like if you were going to make a movie out of it, because on the one hand, you have this master of the universe, the very successful businessman, and yet throughout the book, you also refer to yourself in this very almost fragile tone when you talk about your childhood, or you talk about all those years of hiding your sexuality. But what's amazing to me is that those feelings lasted so long into your successful period, which admittedly began when you were pretty young. And was that something you had even thought about or addressed before you started writing the book?
In what way? Addressed which?
Just this sort of dichotomy of your personality, that you can, even in reading the book, some of it's so, the conqueror, when you get into sort of struggles, business struggles, you are the Barry Diller who I think was very much presented to the world for so many years. But there is this other more fragile side of you that comes across very poignantly and real. It doesn't feel
Was
like
I
something.
aware of it as it was happening?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, well, I don't know if I really was, to tell you the truth. I think it's more that when one of the things that has always been true for me, probably certainly share this with some people, which is an inability to live in the moment, uh,
Huh.
to live fully in the moment, for a whole host of reasons that involve compartmentalization, also uh, a kind of worry that if you live in the fullness of the moment, it will produce other dangers that you weren't aware of, et cetera, et cetera. Writing a book, you are actually, it's the first time I've ever really enjoyed. So I didn't really, I've had very few actual failures, let's call them, none significant. I mean, I've made huge mistakes and things haven't worked, but I've no big failures in my life. And I've had huge amount of successes. And in writing the book, not only did I actually begin to enjoy the moment of those successes, I began to understand some of the reasons that I was able to succeed and use some of the dysfunction of my earlier life. Actually, I realized were the tools that I used to succeed. That was very revelatory.
So that's really interesting to me. So those dysfunctions, as you call it, I mean, to go into them in depth, somebody has to read. They have to read the book, right? And or listen to it, and you read it. I have to say extremely well. It's not easy to do that, but um,
It wasn't
what do
easy to
you?
do it, I will tell you.
It's torture, right?
It's very, it's a so I go to this little recording booth at Simon and Schuster. It's a tiny little room, and you're in it for like 25 hours, 6, 8 hours at a time. I mean, it's grueling. And I thought, oh, this is okay. I finished it. I thought, well, that's an achievement. And I sent it to a friend of mine who's a tough critic and a good judgment. And he said, Junket, it's terrible. You cannot do this. And I said, oh no. He said, look, you're not an actor and you need help you need to act it. And uh, we'll do it again and we'll get somebody who is good at this and you'll do it again. And I did do it again and it came out better.
Wow, that's a humbling experience, I imagine, to do that. But going back to those dysfunctions, is there a way you could clarify for people? Because I think a lot of people, especially people in a dark place in their life or whatever, wonder how do I turn this piece of garbage into something positive?
I don't think it's, I mean, I know the things, so I can talk about them. I don't think it's like I'll take this disadvantage and turn it into an advantage. I think it's the fact that, first of all, I learned early that I had to please in order to survive. The only one in my family that was available was to please my mother. And so I learned how to be out of this need. I learned how to please. And that, as I entered in my early 20s, working life, I had an ability to seduce people that came out of that. That's what that need disadvantage, so to speak, was that I felt just overpowering need to do that. So I got good at that. Uh, and that list kind of goes on and on in that because I had one big fear, which was fear of sexual revealing my sexuality at this time, or the confused sexuality that I had. If you have one big fear, all other fears reduce. So luckily enough, as against folk, quote, normal folk, uh, I did not see risk the way other people saw risk because I thought I just had one big risk and that obliterated the stakes for any other risk. And that was something that, again, it had nothing to do, I didn't do that. It just came out of my circumstances. So, I mean, I have all these tools that were out of a dysfunctional family life and all sorts of other things that you can do. You know, say, I don't think I did anything with them, but two things are the outcomes of that. Either your biology gives you the ability to, not to give, your biology is strong enough so that the natural uh, growth for you is those tools become big assets to you. If you don't have good biology or whatever, then this dysfunctional life you led as a child is this dysfunctional and worse life you'll lead as an adult.
But I would say over time, you say your biology, but I think you talk in the book about I can't remember his name off the hat, but a psychiatrist or
Yes.
psychologist who is so helpful. So you had somebody helping you think
Oh,
about this or
yes.
get
Yes, yes.
through.
But that has nothing, you know, I was, I don't know, saved. Would I have saved myself without him? Yeah, probably. Because as I say, I think my biology is strong. But at an early age, I had a great psychiatrist who got me over all the misunderstandings I had about uh, all sorts of issues. That is what good doctors do for you. But it isn't like he turned and helped with this tool or that tool. He just, he actually reduced anxiety, which is what I was after.
Right. And so, I mean, I think obviously a central, more than anxiety, but fear that you write about in the book was the fact that you were attracted to men. And in a lot of ways, I think you were way ahead of the curve, at least in probably not in terms of actuality, but in terms of the way people talk about things. I mean, I think now people understand that sexuality is fluid, or at least a lot of people do. A lot of people might disagree with that. But in the book, you say that you've had many men in your life, but really only one woman. And the story of you and Diane von Furstenberg is it's an incredible story in and of itself, but it's more incredible because so much of your book is also about your struggle with having gay relationships. And I guess it's fascinating to me was what was it that made you decide at this point in your life or that point 10 years ago, whenever it was, to reveal that part of your life, which a lot of people have
Well,
speculated about over the years.
yeah. I don't know that, I mean, reveal. I don't think I've never posed as anything, so my life's never been a secret now, since my life has both been with men and with Dion and whatever, that people say, oh, we don't get that, or what is that? And uh, again, if I know it's a good story, so I wanted to tell it, you have to tell it true. So it was never an issue for me in quote revealing anything. Because again, I think everybody's speculated about me for so long. Why? I don't know. There isn't that much interest, but whatever interest there was, I've been, and Dion has been the subjects of all the speculation. And so I just wanted to tell the story. And as I said, as I wrote, that it's it all this speculation. I'll just tell the tale, and then you'll see what it is.
No, I understand that, but why did you decide to do it final now? I mean, is it just because you decided to tell your story and that was part of it? You didn't have some kind of urge to help other
Oh no,
people?
no, 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 no.
No, no.
Sorry, I did it. I had no. I, again, I had thought it's a good story. I like stories, and I guess I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could actually tell it. And I was ambivalent about publishing it. I wasn't sure really up until a few months before it was ripped out of me to actually go to a printer, so to speak, that I would actually publish this. And it wasn't, I didn't, have nothing to teach anyone. I didn't think that uh that, that I don't like, I just don't like some of books written about people who've been in business and whatever are interesting, but I I didn't have anything like, oh, please go do this, or this is your path, or use my path for your, your journey, etc. Again, I just thought it was a good story. And again, I was getting to the point where I thought, you know what? I'm getting up to the point where I may be too old to tell it. And I have no memory left. Be
Yeah,
God,
well, you
that's
have a pretty good memory. There's an incredible amount of detail in it. And so this is the American Jewish Historical Society virtually, which is a repository of the American Jewish experience, which is an extremely different experience than the European Jewish experience. And it entails a lot of different people. And you don't really talk too much about being Jewish. In fact, I was talking to a young person the other day and saying I was going to interview you, and they said, "Oh, is he Jewish?" And I said, "Yeah, he is." But I guess the question I have for you is, what does that mean to you? What has it meant to you to be Jewish, if anything?
well, it's I think probably tribal more than anything else because it is not what's called theological or spiritual in that for different reasons. Neither of my parents, we're not really sure about my mother's ancestry, uh, but very much so about my father's, who grew up in a very orthodox uh, environment around the turn of the century, last century, uh, and uh, because it was oppressive to him, he wanted nothing to do with organized religion, and so I didn't have that in my background, uh, but I'm very much know my roots, uh, and again, it is I belong and I honor that, but I don't know that much about it.
That's interesting. And I'm just curious because Dion comes from a very different kind of background, right? Her mother was a Holocaust survivor. And
Yes.
I was wondering that, I mean, I know you've been involved with her for such a long time, you may not remember, but I did meeting her or becoming a family with her actually uh, change your thoughts about Judaism? I don't want to say Judaism so much as because that implies a religious aspect, but just being Jewish, did it change your feeling about it or make you see it any differently?
It's always it's where you have comity, and I know I have it with other Jewish people. It's not that I have it more than I do with others. That I just know. That seems to me innate. It's not something uh it's not something I managed. It's just something innate within me. So I knew that always. I I never ran away from it, and it was something I just recognized as decades went on. There is an affinity, and I don't know if I'd use the word proud, but I honor that affinity.
That's interesting. And, you know, right now we're living in a very
Oh, God,
hyperbolic
don't even
age.
let's not even go to where
Well, we're
we're
not going to talk
living
about
today.
politics, but I am going to ask you just about the focus on anti-Semitism right now because it's become such
Yes.
a huge conversation point, and I just wonder how you feel about the conversation around it, the reality of it, or the exaggeration or minimization of it, and also whether you personally have felt anything like that in any
Never.
kind of a serious way.
No, I never have. I grew up in a place where a very large percentage of the people who were in and around me were Jewish, so I certainly had zero of it. Uh, and I've never, I mean, have I been silently or otherwise, quote, discriminated against? I'm sure in certain pockets and in certain places, yes, for this, that, and other reasons. But no, I've never experienced it, but I recognize that now, and I think so much of this is wrapped up right now in the issues involving Israel, and
Mhm.
it is produced. These things do go in cycles, but this has given, I wouldn't call it, well, license, whatever, but particularly with young people, which really surprises me, but and somewhat stuns me, because they don't recognize the they don't have history in their focus of how Israel was created and how it's had to defend itself uh, for every decade of its existence. Uh, and it unfortunately has produced this wave that I I I don't know, because it will relate to further things that are happening in Israel and Gaza and all of that that is currently going on until that resolves itself. And as you look at it, it's very hard to find a positive resolution in the near term. So it's going to continue to feed this, and there's there's very little that can be done other than to try to educate people about uh, the reality on the ground, the reality of the fragility of the state of Israel, uh, given its conflicts with its neighbors, its et cetera, et cetera. You don't need me to go into this for now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thank you. So I have a question here from somebody who's listening who says, and I know in the book you talk a lot about it's interesting to me because I think throughout the book, and I want to talk to you more about this, but a lot of times when you are, especially in the television world, but even later in the movies, you talk a lot about values and how even though we all like to make fun of TV or whatever because of FCC regulations and all of that, there were certain limits you couldn't go beyond on TV, and and I think now we're in a in a very different world. But there's a question from somebody that says, "Do you agree with Bob Iger and Disney's
Oh
decision to
my God.
take Jimmy
I,
Kimmel?"
first of all, I don't know all the facts here, but I am. What is happening now is is quite remarkable. So for the if in fact Jimmy Kimmel and anybody who's, you can say extreme things, or you can say things to to make a comedic point or a political point or whatever, and almost none of it rises to actually being hired for it. I mean, if he made a extreme statement about the Kirk situation, I'm sure he would clarify it in one way or the other, or defend it. To take his program off the air, quote, because of it, is an extraordinary thing. Now, this gets into too many weeds here, but the commissioner, the chairman of the FCC, the cable television is not ruled by the FCC, but ABC uses, quote, the public airwaves. And in doing so, they have to program, in return for this free license, they have to program, quote, in the public interest, close quote. Now that's a very broad thing, and and there is, with broadcasters, an increased sense of responsibility. What has happened, though, is because of the politicization, uh, this heinous politicization of the FCC, where you have the chairman of the FCC actually saying that un unless they act to determine what versions of speech are good or not good according to their values, uh, and if they don't act on that, he, as chairman of the FCC, will act on that. That's That's beyond, I mean, there's a lot of this going on and lots of others. That is beyond frightening. And if that's what motivated the taking Kimmel off the air, even temporarily, just like what motivated these large communications companies to settle baseless litigation because of the leverage used against them by the FCC. This is very tough stuff, very, very bad stuff. And I I I I am I, I'm very concerned about this because it is just another domino for whatever your political stuff is, and I'm not interested in litigating that. But the idea that this literally, it's radio and the Communications Act of 1934, so it's almost 100 years, that there has been a semblance of stability and decency, general decency, in how broadcasters treated their public service responsibilities. And it's now being upended. Wow.
Well, so thank you for that. And I feel like you're touching on something else I wanted to talk to you about, is this notion of values, because it's a it's a fascinating question right now, because we used to think, I mean, when you were at ABC, certainly when I was a kid growing up, there was this notion, and maybe it was a false notion, that there was a shared sense of values in the country that sort of transcended political differences.
Well, there was something, Julie, it was called the Fairness Doctrine. It was actually embodied in law. And again, just like you program in the public interest is such a broad statement, but when you say the public interest, you do realize embedded in there are values. They're not political positions. As a matter of fact, they're anti-political positions. Uh, the public interest and the fairness doctrine means that you will have programming that balances out itself over the wide spectrum of what you put on, and that you won't do things that are anti-social. And uh, who would think, whether you think Kimmel is funny or Colbert is funny or whatever you would think of them, who would think that they're antisocial? I mean, they'll say things that are things you don't like or whatever, whatever. But these are, by the way, comedy shows. And yes, comedy also is political, but it's comedy. So, I don't know. I got no more to say about it.
No. Thank you. Thank you. So another thing I did want to ask you, I feel like your story, which somebody said, could you share a bit about your life and your parents? I have to say, you have to read the book because it's way too much to talk about in this shorter period. It's a fascinating story, but I will say your story is not a rags to riches story. It's a well-off Beverly Hills kid
Yeah.
to riches story, but and it's a fantastic story. But two things I did want to talk to you about. At one point, you worked for a lot of very powerful people, Charlie Bluthorn first, and then Rupert Murdoch. And when you were working for Rupert Murdoch, that's when the revelation came to you, or whatever you want to call it, that you wanted to
I
count.
wanted to be independent.
You wanted to be independent, and most people would laugh because they would have said, you're really rich, you can do whatever you want, how could you say you're not independent? But I loved this word, you wanted to count, because I think in some ways that's the thing that everybody wants. But what does that mean to you?
Yes, it had in my own uh, cacophony of things, but I felt that I didn't deserve to count. In the world uh, that the concept of counting to me, which you can taken to decipher through the tenses of it. But counting was very, very important to me, counting in the eyes of others as someone of some self and some substance. And and so it was for me a sensitive issue. Uh, it was sensitive in the sense that I felt certainly the lack of it as I was growing up and my early period. And I've kind of always, I don't think you lose, or at least I've never really lost that insecurity. It is, of course, wildly overcompensated for, and maybe that's the motivating wheel here. But uh, I think that that was something I had a lack of and aspired to. I've always admired those people who are confident. Uh, and we all know people who give off the vibration of, now, whether it may not be true inside of them, but I kind of often have felt that they walk and talk with confidence because they are confident. It is not overcompensation, because when it's overcompensation, then it's a false ring and you can feel it and see it and hear it. But I'm like always in awe of those people who are naturally confident. And it is very possible that if I had been, I would end up not being very successful and being a shoe clerk at Macy's. Uh, but I'm not, and I wasn't, and so I aspired.
Um, so- okay. I this is very interesting. This whole counting thing and what you aspired to. So you have become, by anybody's measure, a wildly successful person. You have,
Yes,
I mean, I
yes,
think there's no argument about that.
no.
And you have become a billionaire, of which there are very few in the world. And you're looking down, but it's a fact. I can't help it. I didn't do it. You did it. But I'm curious, when somebody says that about you, how does it make you feel? Do you feel proud? Do you feel embarrassed? And do you feel a sense of responsibility for having
I,
accumulated so
I
much?
think absolutely that uh, if you have wealth, you absolutely have a responsibility, and uh, and and your responsibilities, of course, they start with your family, but they shouldn't end with your family. If you have wealth, that whether you're going to pass wealth on to uh, future generations, whatever you do with that, you also have to figure out, all right, what are you going to do with, so to speak, the corpus of this wealth?
Mm-hmm.
What is its purpose? Because even though I don't have a very acute sense of money because I never had a lack of it, I have the knowledge and the respect for uh, for it as we have to think about what is its public good uses. And that's a responsibility. You can't, I think those people that shirk it, I'm shocked and surprised. There are those, but as we know, uh, philanthropy of wealthy people is an extraordinary, and America is so far the leader in this, and has been for a long time. And the Jewish people are so far a leader in this. I'm not saying that there are not other countries and other races, religions, etc. But I think those values are demanding, and 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 so we as a family think about that, and I hope our children, grandchildren, uh, we're organizing it so we're incentivizing them to think about that. But yeah, it is a responsibility that you ought to acquit I don't say necessarily pridefully, but you ought to acquit it to the degree of its responsibility, which I think is great.
So two of the more, you don't put your name on things, which I
No,
think is interesting. So I guess I'd like you to answer why. And also, how do you feel about paying taxes? Do you mind paying taxes?
I paid a lot of taxes because, I mean, one of the things is if you work, if you're an employee, and I was an employee for the first 49 years or 30 years of business life, uh, you are, you're paid an generally ordinary income for which you don't have complicated tax avoidance situations, et cetera. So over the years, because of that status, up until 20 years ago or so, uh, I was in that camp, and I always thought, yes, fine. I'm quite happy to have at least half of my income, quote, taxed. Uh, I I have no issues with that. I think that there is a thing of quote paying their fair share, which is a bromide of the last administration for this one, always directed at the quote rich are not quote paying their fair share. Uh, when you're paying, and you probably are paying 60, 70, some odd percent of and that is you know, with certain people, that's you know, that's a lot of actual nominal dollars. Uh, that it seems like, yes, you are paying your fair share. You're probably paying a little more than your fair share, but you know what? Who cares?
Good answer. Who cares? That's right. There's a lot left over. Somebody asked what your philanthropic priorities are, and I would say, I don't know if you're in your office right now, but
Yeah,
probably you can see Little Island
I can
from
see
there.
little bit.
Um,
Several of the things are that we do. I love public parks and public institutions, uh, and we we're doing that in many places. We've done it in the Lower West Side of New York with something called the High Line, and with Little Island, are two fairly large projects that we've been primarily responsible for. Uh, I love that. But our philanthropy, that's not the girth of the philanthropy we do, is in so many institutions in education. We like directing uh, our resources to situations where we are as much as possible helping individuals rather than dealing institutionally.
And I'm just curious because, we live in a city where somebody's name is on every building. Certainly, our president likes to put his name on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And yet you seem almost religiously, I don't mean
It-
religiously like that, but you
well,
definitely,
it is.
we don't see a Diller.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a snob about this, and it's probably, look, people putting their names on things is perfectly reasonable. Uh, and I have nothing against it. I'm too shy, and I think I mean, I don't know how shy I really am, but I just don't want it for our stuff. I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever go just hang out at Little Island or do you
I
go
go
to
there
shows?
all the time. I like going there because we were able to build this island that was a very hard project to actually get done, and very ambitious, and I think kind of iconic, at least in a lot of ways that people's. But what I like is there are these bridges that you get onto and off of it, and to just see how happy it makes people. I mean, I I go there because it makes me happy to see people being happy about something that one person's will caused to happen, without which they wouldn't be so happy. So I love it.
And it's just this anonymous pleasure you take in it. You just sit there and see them and think, oh, I
Yeah, I
helped
don't
build
have a little badge on me saying this is me. I did this. Though people say nice things to me, very often, but no, I'm a absolutely anonymous observer of it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to generate the same feeling.
So we're almost out of time, but before we go, I did want to ask you because I'm just curious about this. I'm curious about it all, but in doing this book, you really opened yourself up. You really exposed yourself in a lot of way to your inner self. And I was wondering through the process, what has been maybe the toughest part, whether it's in an interview or whatever, and what's been the most gratifying part?
What has been extraordinarily gratifying to me and incredibly surprising, because again, I just thought, okay, I've told the story honorably and true. It's a good story. What's amazing to me is how emotional people are to me in their responses to it. And I've gotten a huge amount, and it's just so surprising to me, of people saying how the story affected them, and I'm getting these responses that are just so much greater than I ever anticipated, and it makes me feel great about having done it, which is something I never bargained for, organized for, thought would happen, so that it's happening now. Even though yes, I realize uh, I've revealed myself, but I did write the book, so I must have been up for that. And that exposure is daunting, but what I'm getting back is just so nice.
That's so great. And so I guess final question. So now do you feel like you count? Did this help close that circle?
As I say, I don't know that you ever get rid of base insecurity and issues like that, uh, uh, but it sure helps close the gap.
Well, that's wonderful. I can't thank you enough for doing this. You're
Be
now
with
part of
you.
the archive at the
All
American
right.
Jewish Historical Society. Along,
Glad I could be that, and thank you.
thank you so much. Take
Bye-bye,
care. Bye
everyone.
bye.
Thank you.